Hey guys, it's Magnet. Guess what time it is? It's time for Legacy of the Void closed beta. And as you see there, it's time! It's time to get going with this, and I'm going to be talking about all the changes expected to come through in beta. Dates, how you can get access to it, all that kind of fun stuff. And what I'm planning for giving you guys some beta footage so you can check out the game and get a little bit of a leg up on it before it actually releases. So let's take a look at what's going on. So the first thing to note is that it is a closed beta. It begins March 31st. For those that are not familiar, closed beta basically means that they decide who participates. But fortunately, anybody that was at BlizzCon should get priority access, or at least that's what they stated at BlizzCon. But one thing I wasn't sure of is if you bought a virtual ticket to BlizzCon, if you still got the same access. I think so, but I'm not totally sure. And by the way, if you want to get in on this, you definitely do need to apply right now. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Let me pull up my screen really quickly. And this is going to be kind of ugly, so I apologize. So what you're going to want to do is go to battle.net and go, when you log in, hit account right here, and it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. You want to go to Games and Codes, go to Beta Profile Settings, and then you can check off which ones you want to be beta testers for. And then I'm not sure what the priority is, like if they want people with better computers or higher leagues or whatever. I'm not totally sure what they want, but I believe there is a form in somewhere or another, if you've never filled this out before, that will ask you all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely check that out there. But that's a place that you can definitely get it done. So I guess we'll jump back into here and talk about the rest of the updates that they have. So yeah, go ahead and apply right now. You can even pause the video and go do it before I talk about the rest of the beta. So, an overview, and by the way, people that have been keeping up on the beta changes and my videos and whatnot already know most of this, but it is nice to just see them confirm most of it. So I'll just approach this as if nobody's ever seen this before. So the minerals at each base are going to be altered from any previous iteration of Heart of the or StarCraft anyway, and that is that every base spawns with 8 mineral patches, or at least it's how it's been in the past. 1500 will be the starting count for the minerals at half of the patches, and the other half will only have 750. So that's going to force people to expand faster, and overall make them try to take more of the control of the map instead of just sitting on a limited number of bases. So workers, they're going to increase that up to 12 to start each game, and before it was 6, so the game starts way faster than it did before, allowing for all sorts of different builds, and basically any build that you know right now is going to be scrapped because the timings are going to be 100% different. Unit scan range increase, which basically means that the A-move AI is better. And you'll note that if you did play Heart of the Swarm earlier, and say you had like a Stalker or something wander into the range of a Widowmine, the range on a Stalker is obviously better than a Widowmine, but it still would wander into that range if it was on attack move, because their scan range wasn't that good on the units in previous versions of StarCraft 2. So they're working on tightening this up. Overall, that's basically going to be a performance difference from their perspective, and probably why they didn't do it initially, but it seems like they found a way to get that done. So AI will pick targets faster if they're on A-move, which should allow them not to wander into the range of units that they're not supposed to. It should change a lot of the units' interactions as well, if it outranges another unit. So be aware of stuff like that. It'll feel a lot different, feel maybe a lot less slippery in Legacy of the Void, which is good. They're also changing the in-game timer to reflect how many seconds have passed in the real world as well, whereas before the timer in the game was about 40% faster than real life. So they're going to be matching those up, which further invalidates any builders that you know, especially based on time. And a side note here is that Archon mode is ready to go. For those of you that don't know what Archon mode is, it's basically that 2 players control the same race and the same set of units and kind of share control there. And it allows for a lot more to be done by 2 players, since they're both playing the exact same kind of set of units, or the same one race, I guess. It's hard to define those words because I've never had to describe that before, but imagine a 1v1 where both teams of 1 consist of 2 players. So let's move on into unit changes now. The first one we're going to talk about is the Protos Adep. It's a brand new unit. This thing is pretty crazy if you guys haven't seen the video that Blizzard released to go along with the beta announcement. But this is a ranged ground-only attack, not a round attack. A ranged ground-only attack, It has a unique teleporting ability, which basically creates a copy of it, but the copy can't be attacked and it can't do anything but other than just walk around. And you can control it all you want, and after a certain amount of time, the actual unit will teleport to where the fake unit got to. So, say for example, and they showed this in the video, that there was a Terran and they had a bunker and you had one of these units. You could send out the fake unit, or the whatever you want to call it. They call it the shade, I believe. And you can walk it around, and wherever that shade winds up is where your unit's going to teleport to. So you could potentially walk right past the bunker and just go kill workers, and then wait for the cooldown and try to run out later. But it's an interesting mechanic in the sense that it's teleporting, but it's also teleporting based on the pathing that's available for any ground unit. So very cool idea here. It's also meant to be a core unit, so it's not something like an early game harassment unit only like a Reaper, for example. It's meant to be mixed into Protoss armies later in the game as well, and there's going to be obviously be a lot of finicking with this unit to try to get in a good place, so it's not too overpowered, while it also doesn't invalidate the roles of like Stalkers and Zealots, for example. So, let's take a look at the Disruptor, which has been out since the beginning of Legacy of the Void and basically has not changed at all. The changes, or rather the details on this unit, is that it has a burst area of effect damage attack, and it basically you activate an ability, and the unit goes invulnerable during this ability, and it also gets a lot more speed. And then after a certain amount of time, the unit blows up at a certain point. The unit doesn't die though, so that you can run it away, assuming that you don't get it killed once it has detonated. So basically it forces the other player to micro at points, and it also forces you to micro, and it really punishes people for having big blobs of armies, and they will get pretty wrecked by this thing if they're not careful. Also, it is a later game tech, so it does require a RoboBay as of right now, but they didn't announce a lot of specifics on that, at least aside from what they had shown at BlizzCon and other things that they have updated throughout time. So this basically has not changed since they announced it back in Alpha. So, Warpin changes are also different, and this has also been the same throughout the Alpha development. Basically, the Warpin times are longer, and I think it's actually twice as long. If not twice, then it's almost twice. It might have been like a 5-8 second change, but again, they haven't been going over a lot of specifics with these beta changes because they expect a lot to change. Units warping in will take double the damage as well, so if you try to just warp in the middle of a battle, your units will drop like crazy. So, yeah. Pretty basic stuff. That also has not changed really at all since the beginning of Alpha. Warp Prism stuff, again, hasn't changed too much since the start of Alpha, but this is a huge change, guys. This is going to change a lot. The load-in range on the Warp Prism is enormous now, almost to the point where you could grant Blink to any ground unit if you had good enough micro. And if you can imagine something like having 3 or 4 Colossus and being able to load your Colossus in from range and then unload them immediately, it's crazy the kind of work you could get done with this kind of stuff, and it's almost to the point where I've been saying that this is probably too powerful ever since they debuted it, and they've had a lot of internal struggle with this as well, as far as trying to find the right numbers along with this and the Immortal, which we're going to talk about here in just a sec. Actually, let's just do it now. The Immortal has their hardened shields replaced by an activated ability which will just absorb damage. So basically you just turn on the ability, it'll take some amount of damage before it runs out, effectively granting kind of a unique extra shield mechanic that wasn't there really with hardened shields. It's interesting because it does force people to be more active with their Immortals rather than just being automatic with the hardened shields. But like I mentioned with the Warp Prism, they've had a lot of trouble with this because you basically have a ranged drop that can take all sorts of damage before it really starts to hurt at all. So drops with Immortals especially are going to be really crazy throughout beta, so we're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff. So look out for that. Oracles, this also has not really been changed as far as I know. They can basically put down a proximity mine, and whenever it's tripped it will send out a stasis field in the area that will stasis any enemy units that are affected by it. So imagine you put one of these mines at an opening to a base and a whole bunch of Zerglings try to run in. All those Zerglings will get frozen in place. While they're frozen, they can't attack. They also can't be attacked, but you could just have an army there waiting, so as soon as they expire you could just dominate them pretty easily. It theoretically will be good for defensive plays, like say for example a Zerg is trying to attack a Protoss third base. You could put down a couple of these and try to make them wander their army into that and kind of freeze half the army while you kill the other half. A lot of interesting utility there. Wrong button. And now the Tempest, I know that this has changed a little bit. It has changed quite a bit from Heart of the Swarm, but from throughout beta, they had this initial version of the Tempest in, which is that it had really fast speed, it could only attack ground, and disintegration basically meant that you would assign some tag on a unit, and it would just continue to take damage over a long period of time. I think the periods before were something like 500 damage over 50 seconds or something like that. It's pretty crazy, but it is pretty slow. It's not like an in-battle type of thing. And then they changed it back. They said that they didn't want to do that, and now all of a sudden they're saying that, oh, actually we did want to do that. And the speed increase is actually really big deal, guys. Like, this is not a unit to be toyed around with anymore. They're not going to be slow, lumbering, big beasts anymore. These are so fast to the point where you can actually outrun Hydras that are on creep and outrange them. So theoretically, if this keeps going the way it is, if Zerg opens anything other than Spire, you could just go straight to Tempest, assuming you won't die from any other attacks, and then you'll outrange everything for a really long time. They are super annoying. I actually really like this unit. I can't wait to see how it works out. But yeah, so that's basically how it works. Terran changes. Let's jump into these. This is a Cyclone. There's someone knocking on a wall or something above me. This is called the Cyclone. It's a brand new unit that everyone really thought would not last throughout their alpha testing because it was really overpowered. But I guess they like it enough to keep it in. So basically the stats here are that it does lock onto a nearby unit. It can fire while moving. So basically if you think of a Phoenix that has really, really long range, that's kind of what it is. And they used to have it manual assignment for the locking, and I think they changed that to be automatic, but I'm not 100% sure, considering they were, again, pretty vague on a lot of these details with the beta. But we're going to see it pretty soon anyway, so it's not like it really matters too much. And this is an early factory unit, which has been criticized a lot for being a duplicate of purpose for like Hellions and Reapers and stuff like that, but I mean, it's lasted this test of time so far, so I guess they really like it, so we'll have to see how it works out. Another thing is that they used to have a unit in here called the Herk, and they just recently removed that unit, and right now they're basically saying that they don't know what they want here anymore. They don't know what they want in the sense that they want to put something in, but they're not sure what it's going to be yet. So they even went as far to say that it could be a new building, and what they're going to do is they're going to basically wait for beta games to play out and then customize the unit based upon what role will need to be filled and what's missing. So we'll just have to wait and see on this one. But it is interesting to see the directions that they're thinking of, and definitely thinking outside the box here. And one other note to take here is that they mentioned that they didn't want it to be a factory unit, so they're thinking something like barracks or starport. But again, they threw in that wild card there of it could be something like a building. So we'll have to see what comes out of that. Alright, siege tanks. So these are basically the same, except for now they can be loaded into medevacs while they're still in siege mode and redropped in siege mode. So think of a siege tank, except for it can fly around if you have a medevac. It obviously can't fire while it's loaded in, so you'll have to redrop it off, but the positioning and the harassment potential with this thing is insane. It'll also be interesting to see how people run mech armies now, because mech was notably not very micro-intensive, and this kind of forces people to be micro-intensive if they want to play mech, in the sense that they'll need to reposition their tanks all the time, and you could get into really interesting battles that way. Another thing is that they announced this at the beginning of Alpha as well, has not really changed, and they did clarify to say that the battlecruisers can now teleport anywhere on the map with a cooldown ability. This is weird, and I'm not totally sure what to think about this, but before there were some questions as to whether they meant it could teleport literally anywhere, or it could only teleport places that you couldn't see, which was really confusing. But they did clarify it to say that it can teleport basically anywhere on the map. So I don't know what to think quite about this. It'll be really interesting. It'll definitely add a lot of longevity to battlecruisers, and I can imagine that being super annoying with the Yamato stuff too. And at least I think the ability's on cooldown. I haven't really been able to see exactly what they meant, but if it is on cooldown and you can Yamato, then that would be crazy. But now that I think about it, it's probably not on a cooldown. It's probably energy based, so you couldn't combine Yamato and teleport, because that would be ridiculous. But anyway, moving on. Let's jump into the Zerg changes right now, and this is probably the best unit that they've unveiled. Everyone loves this thing, but I have to say it probably is a little bit too strong right now, so we'll have to see. Basically, it's a Ravager. It's a mutated Roach on Lair Tech, and the ability that it has is a mortar-style attack that both players can see where it's going to land. So basically it'll shoot it out, it'll note where it's going to land in a couple of seconds, and it'll land there in a couple seconds. And if this happens to hit a force field, or if the player targets a force field, it will break it. So should put an end to a lot of really gimmicky Protoss stuff relying on force fields. But this thing also has a regular attack too, so that's why this thing is considered to be really strong right now, is that it both has a pretty strong ground attack plus this big bombardment of attacks, and it's really hard to micro against it. Played a lot against it, it's very annoying, but it's also still really cool, so I can't wait to see where they go with that. Lurkers, so this is an interesting introduction as well. Those of you that played Brood War know all about the Lurker already, and it's basically the same unit from then. But for those of you that don't know, it is a mutated Hydralisk. It only has burrowed attacks, and they're kind of line splash damage, almost like a Hellion. And there is a range upgrade available, so it will start to outrange defenses back at other people's bases. Jeez, I can talk. And that includes things like cannons, planetary fortresses, mostly just buildings. It won't outrange anything like tanks or anything crazy like that. But still, this offers a really unique kind of siege mechanism to the Zerg attack that isn't as gimmicky as Swarm Hosts were. So, should be a pretty cool introduction. Corruptors have been changed. Corruption has been removed. An ability has been added that deals increasing damage to a target. And I believe that this is ground units, and I need to double check to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that they've really only demoed it for ground units, but I think that may be mostly because it's immobile while it's using the ability, so that if something wanders out of the range, then it cancels it out anyway. So it probably wouldn't be very good to use on air units, even if it were available. But I wasn't totally sure which way they were saying on that, but they've only demoed it, showing it attacking ground buildings. But I've also been attacked by it when I was using ground units. So it seems like a ground-only thing, but it's not limited to just buildings. It is units as well. Yeah. So basically, the way that it works is it will deal damage to a target, and it'll increase that damage over time. So kind of like the Void Ray's charge-up ability back in Wings of Liberty, how it would just slowly gain more damage as it locked onto the same target for long enough. I think it's pretty similar to that, so we'll have to see how this all develops, but definitely gives the Corruptors more of a purpose than just kind of being there to kill area units and that's it. So next thing we're going to look at is the Viper. Has an AoE following a targeted air unit, and the effects remains if the targeted unit dies. So if you think about a science vessel back in Brood War, or you might have seen it in the campaign or something like that, it works kind of like that, except so that you target it on a unit. When that unit moves around, the spell also moves around with that unit. But this time, if the unit dies, the spell will just stay in that area and continue to damage any enemy units that happen to come in there. So it's meant to counter super, like, Sky Toss type of builds, especially with a lot of Phoenix or something like that. So you could imagine if you were doing like a Mutalisk build, you could actually switch into Vipers to support your Mutalisk to try to get big hits on all those Phoenix that tend to clump up. But a lot of interesting utility here, and I haven't actually seen this in action yet, so it'll be pretty cool. Speaking of Swarm Hosts, like we mentioned earlier, they are not meant to be for siege strategies anymore. The Locusts have to be spawned manually, but they can also spawn the Locusts while they're unburrowed. The Locusts are stronger, and the crazy one here is that the Locusts can be upgraded to fly. So, pretty crazy. One thing I didn't note on here, by the way, is that the time between Locust spawns is really long now. Almost to the point where you have, if you did it perfectly, where you'd have Locusts on the field half the time, and then the Swarm Host would be totally inactive and helpless the other half of the time. So it's mostly kind of a harassment type of unit, meant to be kind of quick pop-ins where you jump in there, drop off some Locusts, have them do stuff, and you run away with your Swarm Host while that's going on. So interesting unit. And by the way, just in case you haven't read ahead, flying Locusts must still land before they attack. So it's not like they will be flying units like a Broodlord or something. They still do have to land. But you can imagine how irritating that's going to be if you're running like a siege tank strategy to have stuff land on top of your siege tanks so that you kill your own units. And that'll be pretty irritating. But nevertheless, I guess we'll have to see how that all works out. Nidus Worms cannot be attacked while the worm is building, which means that a lot of Nidus Worm strategies, and especially late-game Nidus Worm utilization, will happen. So this is a weird change. I'm not totally sure how this is going to stand up, but it's been the same throughout all of the alpha stages, so we'll have to wait until that one pro gets in their hands, probably somebody like Solar, to start really abusing it and showing the power of it. So we'll see how this one all works out, but at least if you try to go for some sort of Nidus Worm strategies, it can't be killed by workers or a bunch of piddly units that aren't meant to stop attacks like this, so should be pretty interesting. Let's talk about my plan for what the content will be for beta. So I should have first access to the closed beta based on the fact that I do have BlizzCon tickets from last year, so they said that those people would be getting it first, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and I'll just try to log in the first day that it comes out, which should again be the 31st. So I'll just try to log in, or I'll just check my email or whatever and see if it's come up, and as soon as I get that, I'll start playing games. In the past, in 1v1s, I have played Protoss, just because that's the race I played, I guess. But for the beta especially, I'm going to try to play random just so I can show a whole bunch of different stuff to you guys. And for the record, I'm not going to be playing super serious games in the beta, considering it's mostly just to experiment and try to break the game and give Blizzard feedback and stuff. So I'm not going to be running like really abusive strategies, and I'm not going to be running the same strategy over and over. I'll just be switching strategies all the time and doing weird stuff just to see what works in Legacy of the Void. But I'll likely stream these games, so check out my stream there and follow me if you want to check these out. I'll post the interesting games to my YouTube channel and probably have some more commentary laid over the stream so that we can have, you know, discussion on that and whatnot. I'll try to make a couple of games per week, but I can't promise you for sure because I am in the depths of final school stuff for the next couple of months. But I am guessing that the beta will last for a really long time, and I'm thinking to the point where it will last up until the end of the year. So we'll have to see how long it actually does last, but that's what I would expect, considering this is their last chance to basically change StarCraft in any big and, you know, huge ways. Plus, I think they would want to wait for the current WCS season to run out before dropping a new game on everyone's head. So I think that the beta in some iteration, whether it's open or closed, will last for quite a long time, and I'll get content up for you guys in some form or another sooner rather than later. Okay, so if you have any additional questions, post in the comments down below and I will answer it in detail. And for those of you that are not familiar, I do have Q&A episodes where I basically answer any question that somebody asks me. It can be about StarCraft, it can be about anything, it doesn't matter. And I'll give them as detailed answers as I can. A lot of people tend to like the interactivity and being able to kind of pick my brain about a subject that I might not have covered in any other video. But yeah, check it out. I also have a ton of other tutorials available on my channel page, so check that out as well. Tutorials for every race, namely for Heart of the Swarm, which I will be restructuring for Legacy of the Void once we start to learn a lot more about it. So probably not until the game actually releases, considering that's when their changes will be very stable. But yeah, so thanks for checking out all the beta changes, and I hope you guys can get into the beta sooner rather than later. And if not, I'll be your guy for checking it out and, you know, figuring out how it plays before everybody else. So thanks for watching the video, and thanks for hanging out. I'll see you guys later.